Hello, my name is Gary Pierce, and today I would like to talk to you about agriculture in the 1860s. By 1860, when the Civil War began, there were 69,000 farms in North Carolina. 46,000 of these, or 71%, were under 100 acres in size. In 1860 there were only 300 plantations of 1,000 acres or more in the state. The 1860 census listed 121 planters and 85,198 farmers. North Carolina has a long history of small farm size. Cattle and hogs were on free range. Livestock was fenced out of fields. Cutting trees for fence rails was a major cause of forest destruction. The Civil War bankrupted most industries in North Carolina, including agriculture. Even the University of North Carolina was forced to close for a time due to the lack of funds. Most people still lived on farms. Farming was very labor-intensive and totally dependent on human and animal power. In order to raise money after the Civil War, the state sold off much of the remaining swamplands. The period between the end of the war and the early 1900s saw the rise of large-scale mechanized timber harvest. There were still substantial acreages of virgin timber in eastern North Carolina in 1860, but essentially none by 1900. One of the largest lumber companies was the John L. Roper Company. John L. Roper is credited with perfecting kiln drying of second-growth sapwood pine. Blue stain had kept it off the northern markets, but kiln drying made it acceptable. The Roper Company had a total sawmill capacity 600,000 bf/day. At 11 or 12 mills. 80% of what they sawed was pine. And now I would like to give you agriculture's role in the war between the states. By me, Gary Pierce, your horticulture extension agent. Our first point is important general differences to note. Sectionalism was the dividing of the U.S. into North, South, East and West. The North was industrialized and the South was agrarian and the West was undeveloped. Basically up for grabs. The South was only area not growing via population or area. The North imported very little but relied on exporting goods. And the South had slaves and the North had the Irish. Ha ha. Our second point. Important ag differences. Cotton General increased the speed of processing cotton. Cotton accounted for 3/4 of the U.S. exports. Cotton could only be grown in the southern climate. Cotton growth was depleting the land. The northern states grew a wide variety of crops. North Carolina is second in the nation today in variety of crops grown. The northern growers were smaller landowners that didn't use slaves. And the South had the planter class system. And now we get to our third point, the tax problem of 1860. Federal government relied primarily on import tariffs since 1812. And the more real tax, import tariff, was a major campaign issue. Next we have our fourth point, the Southern dilemma. The South was losing ground in Congress. Population growing in North hurt House representation. New states and West hurt Senate representation. Cotton territory needs to expand because of soil depletion. And the clash of the grower types in the West. Yankees are raising taxes without building or improving ports, and the tax issue sparked secession just like it did in the Revolutionary War. The fifth point. Lincoln's dilemma. First 8 southern states that seceded took 60% of tax base. The 13 southern states accounted for nearly 80% of tax base in the beginning of the income tax that was only started to pay for the Civil War that we're still paying on. Now our sixth point. England, the naval saviors. 20 to 25% of its population was working in textiles. 1/2 of its exports were textiles. Southern cotton gin increased production every year from 1830 to 1861. England had a huge cotton surplus in 1861. And in 1861 England was suffering from a wheat famine. The North was selling a bumper crop of wheat to England that was harvested by the new McCormick reaper invented by Sir Ross McCormick, who eventually led to the start of one of the best tractor companies, International Harvester. Slavery was less of an issue, and in 1835 England abolished it. England observed that the North freed slaves where they had no jurisdiction and didn't free them where they did. Now for our seventh point. The planter class killed the Confederacy with King Cotton. In 1858, Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina replied to Senator William H. Seward of New York, and I quote, "Without the firing of a gun, without drawing a sword, should they make war upon us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years? England would topple headlong and carry the whole civilized world with her. No. You dare not make war on cotton. No power on earth dares make war upon it. Cotton is king." And a few more points I would like to make before I close. Unrestricted production prior to war. Self-imposed embargo at start of war negated Confederate diplomatic attempts in '61, and made Northern naval embargo more effective. Refused to plant food crops, ducked income taxes by convincing most Southern states to bring more money to make inflation worse, and sold cotton to Northern invaders. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin in 1794. He didn't make any money cause his patent was not upheld in court until he had a couple years left on it. He ended up making his money on a new way to manufacture muskets. Thank you, and I hope this helped you understand a little more on the causes of the war, and how agriculture played a role in the war between the states. Good night and thanks for watching.